So, it's been a while since I've done a video, and I hope you guys haven't been too bored in the absence of the witticisms and random philosophy. Well, my computer broke down, or froze irreparably during the Windows update, so I had to take it to a computer repair shop, and then once it was there, my work schedule and the computer shop schedule conspired to keep my computer away from me for a whole month, because basically I was getting off work at 5:30 and not getting home until like 6:30 because of my long commute, and then the computer repair shop would close by 5. And so on Fridays was the day which I normally have off to do such things as like computers from computer repair shops. I just kept having to work overtime, so that's the story of why I've been procrastinating on videos, because I had no computer to make them with. But now I do have one. We have an amazing episode today, which is requested by a viewer, and the topic is Isaac Newton's flaming laser sword. So when the topic of Newton's flaming laser sword was suggested to me, I must admit I had something much different in mind than what it turned out to be. The brief descriptor which came with the topic suggestion said that the general subject of it was about how pointless it is to argue on issues that cannot be settled by scientific experimentation and observation. So in my mind's eye had worked up an idea of how difficult it is to argue about things that you have no concrete means of settling, like someone claiming there's a thriving civilization in the center of the moon. So here's my idea of what Newton's flaming laser sword would be. It might go like this. Protagonist A, who we will call Ted for the sake of clarity. I personally think that Newton's greatest achievement was not actually the theory of gravity. Protagonist B, who we will call Jed, also for the sake of brevity and clarity. Jed, really? What do you think it was? Maybe his work with optics, or possibly the laws of motion? Ted, no, those are pretty mundane. I was most impressed by his flaming laser sword. His what? Flaming laser sword. Newton never had a flaming laser sword, that's crazy. He was quite brilliant, you know. How do you know he couldn't have had one? That he didn't have a flaming laser sword? It's just obvious. Someone would have certainly written about it. And why didn't it survive? And why did... We had to have heard about it somewhere else if there was one. Well, not all of Newton's work was published, you know. He had many writings about alchemy and biblical chronology that are actually lost. Well, those things actually fit quite nicely into his belief system and the historical period, but a flaming laser sword is completely absurd. Not really. It is a logical, simple step from having an apple fall on his head. Well, naturally he would need something to peel it with. Well, I believe knives had sort of been invented by that time, you know. Well, an intellectual superhero like Newton would not have used something as commonplace as a knife. Then why the heck has no one ever heard about the stupid sword? Well, being a devout pacifist, Newton naturally his invention. Its potential as a weapon became all too apparent when he accidentally cut down an apple tree and 3 farmhouses while peeling his apple. Their collapse and subsequent ruin further reinforced his concept of gravitational attraction. Newton, the inventor extraordinaire and a natural calamity. Well, of course, he'd realized that a careless soldier pointing at the ground could wind up draining the Pacific Ocean into Manchester. Didn't he just figure out how gravity works? Well, it was still in a conceptual stage, so obviously he didn't want to share the flaming laser sword with anyone. So how do you know it existed at all? Didn't I just explain how its existence is logically necessary? No. He just made wild speculations about a historical figure without the remotest shred of logic or evidence. Well, I'm sorry if you're incapable of following the finer points. The existence of Newton's flaming laser sword is all but certain. Well, to me it's just a bunch of nonsensical gibberish. I refuse to believe that Newton was leveling buildings with a lightsaber in the 18th century. It's a flaming laser sword, by the way. And since you seem so confident, can you prove that it does not exist? Jed. Slow, deep breath. Well, no, I can't actually prove beyond a shadow of doubt that it didn't exist. It just seems monumentally improbable. So is yours, you know. Improbable does not mean impossible. Jed slumps in defeat. Yeah, sure, whatever. See, it can be extremely frustrating to talk with someone about a topic that you have no concrete method of resolving. But as it turns out, the real Newton's flaming laser sword is a catchy title that the writer Mike Alder gave to Newton's approach to philosophy, which is best summarized by Newton's own declaration of hypothesis non fingo, which is probably best translated as I do not engage in untestable speculation. Mike Elder defines it as, in its weakest form, it says that we should not dispute propositions unless it can be shown by precise logic and or mathematics to have observable consequences. In its strongest form, it demands a list of observable consequences and a formal demonstration that they are indeed the consequences of the proposition claimed. That sounds a little bit pedantic. But the idea, very much like Occam's razor, is just to simplify the pursuit of knowledge. Newton's new approach was one of the most foundational ideas behind the scientific method, and really sort of began modern science as we know it. This was a departure from the Platonic model of philosophy, which argued that you could arrive at truth solely by reasoning from basic, innately understood principles. And so what happens now is we have a sort of division of knowledge between the hard sciences, which are typically things that can be demonstrated through reliable observation and experimentation, and the soft sciences of theology, ethics, sociology, psychology, etc. So it is something which is can simplify your life if you don't want to engage in debates and things which cannot be settled with reliable observations and experimentations and mathematics, etc. But I find that in real life it's sort of impractical because you have all kinds of random things which happen to you which you really need to have a debate about and decide how you're going to deal with them, which are completely outside the realm of observable sciences. So, and it seems like the more ambiguous and less concretely scientific an issue is, the more likely it is to be a hot debate. And your system of morality tends to be one of the most influential things in how you live your day-to-day life. Unfortunately, almost all of these are soft sciences, without the ability to deduce the validity of a code of conduct by experimentations. So you have all these issues like abortion and euthanasia and immigration reform and civil liberties, and they're all difficult to reach a scientifically correct opinion on. And do experiments and form a hypothesis and so on and so forth, because experimenting on people is generally discouraged and viewed as barbaric. And that's one of those moral choices that people decided to make a line when now they impose on everyone else. And so these issues are probably hotly contested for a long time, and unfortunately they're the very issues which are changing the fabric of society one way or the other, and that you really need to have debates on and come to a conclusion on. So what I find really most frustrating about these things, and it is really a foundational problem with almost all systems of ethics or arguments about ethics, is the fact that until the two parties who are debating can agree on a concrete foundation or a concrete beginning point that they are basing their reasoning off of, they just go in circles because they talk past each other constantly, and no real progress winds up being made. I remember reading a comment thread which seemed like 100 pages long on the issue of abortion, where you had two people. One was a theistic person, and the other one was an atheistic person debating this topic, and they just went in constant circles because the much greater point which they were debating about or disagreeing on, but weren't actually debating in the discussion because they were debating a periphery issue, was what was the basis of morals and how do you define moral behavior. And so things like that happen all the time. So yes, Newton's simulated sword is an awesome tool for focusing on reliable information, but sadly it won't help us with most of our disagreements. But I mean, seriously, how cool is it that Newton actually had this cool flaming laser sword in early Enlightenment England? And maybe that's where George Lucas got his idea from. Alright guys, I'll see you on next time. If you have any more topics and issues you want me to discuss, leave them in the comments and I'll be happy to get to them. And I will talk to you all next time. Thank you for watching.